Okay, I think I got it now. Good morning. Oh, well, welcome to Sunday School. I'm your host, Alonzo Fleming, and I'm trying to get my gadgets going and all the little things happening so that I can present a good Sunday school for you this morning. Let me just test my sound. Let's make sure I'm coming through okay. Yep, I is coming through just fine. Listen, it's like I'm going to stay to an hour this morning. Let me, I'm going to stick to an hour this morning because some of you have lamented to me and said, okay, giving us too much information per dosage. So we're going to lower the dosage a little bit, and um, I will stick to 1 hour on the Sunday school. You know, this past week has been really interesting for me because I've been getting a lot of revelations, if you will. I don't care to use that word too much, but it has been coming through with respect to the what we're doing and the time we are in and what's necessary. It's time for us to really get moving here and really start developing ourselves and allowing that spirit to manifest in us. And so I'm just really happy. I want to start off this morning basically with the third segment of our series entitled The World, the Flesh, the Devil, and the Son of God. And I can hardly wait to get to next week's lesson because you can't talk about the Son of God seriously to us without talking about Jesus. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about, you've never heard this lesson next week. Uh, I mean, I know I'm working on today, but I'm just really excited about the next week because it's going to really open up a lot of the missing pieces that you may have missed from what I'm saying. And you're going to see how Jesus talked and what Jesus thought from a totally different perspective than what you've heard in your churches and in your institutions of religion, which has done nothing more than to serve to obscure what Jesus really was all about. So I'm really excited about next week because that's going to be the final segment, but I may have to break that up into two segments in order to get through all the information. But listen, get a pencil and pad out so that you can get these references that I give you. Today we're going to be talking about the flesh. We've done I'm sorry, the devil. We've done the world and we did the flesh last week, and we talked about it primarily. You got to go back and listen to that one. I'm not going to review a lot of it, but basically, I ended up talking about the flesh, um, and I didn't get to certain points that I needed to get to because we ran out of time, and I wanted to stay within that hour. And one of the things, so let me just quickly pick that up and listen, tell somebody about this. I'm telling you, you're going to be the one that's saying, you know what? I was listening to this brother when it was not popular what he was saying, but now that the science is coming out and it's showing the fact that what he's talking about is true, I was one of the first to be listening in. Anyway, share with somebody. But when we spoke about the flesh, what I didn't point out was the objective of the devil, the ego, the tempter, to develop someone or a group, a population that would be willingly in rebellion against God, to believe that there's a space between the creation and the creator, if you will. And I talked about that when I speak of God, let me just grab something. I'm not talking about an entity that you have been bamboozled into believing in that is separate from you. That there's a space I'm not talking about that entity as God. I'm using the word God for convenience because we understand this term to some degree, God. But when I speak of God, I'm not talking about a separate entity that's looking down upon us, upon the creation, upon humanity, and keeping notes about what we're doing. That's not what I'm talking about when I say God. When I speak of God, I'm speaking of all that is, the embodiment, if you will, of all that exists, of all existence. And I know that your preachers and your theologians have terms to scare you away from that idea, but that is designed to make you think that you can be separate from God. And if you can be separate from God, brothers and sisters, then you can be manipulated and you can be made to believe that you got to go here or go there or do this or do that in order to be reconciled with God. But even in their Bible, even in their scriptures, it asks the question, what shall separate us from the love of God? Now, God is love, so you can say, what shall separate us from God? There is no difference. There is no space between you and God. You got to convince yourself of that fact because it's hard for you to believe that what you do with your body has the power to separate you from all that is. You think that. And as a result of that, you're able to be manipulated, able to be bamboozled and taught to think that unless you go here, unless you do that, unless you join this or join that. But Jesus said, to whom the Son sets free is free indeed. So freedom is what Jesus was about. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but freedom is what he was about. Freedom to understand your inherent power that was given to you and cannot be taken. Even in the Declaration of Independence of this country, they had an inkling of what I'm talking about. Because they said that this life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness were among these inalienable rights that each man has. And they don't talk about men, but I'm talking about man in the sense of male and female. And these inalienable rights, among them, listen, sisters, among these rights that cannot be taken from you nor given to you are life. You're not gonna, life is part of something that is yours inherently. Liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And so that is embodying in our own Declaration of Independence of this country. So if you can be taught to think that there is a space or can be a space between you and God, that there is a place where God is not. I'm hammering down on this because this is crucial. If you can be taught that you can be separated from God, then you are under the power of this thing, this entity we call Satan. And Satan is the God of this world. Satan blinds the mind. Listen to me, sisters. Listen carefully. Satan is the entity, the thought that blinds the mind of them who do not believe that there's no separation between you and God. He blinds the mind of them who do not believe that, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. The light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God. Christ is the image of God. All you got to do is go back to Genesis, and you will see when he spoke of, let us make man in our image. Christ is the image of God. Now, it's much deeper than all of that, and I understand you who have a little more knowledge than what I'm speaking here today, but I know who I'm talking to. So bear with me if you have a deeper understanding of what this is really all about. It's not that I don't understand it, it's just that I know who I'm talking to. And it doesn't make sense to speak Greek to a person who speaks only English. Christ is the image of God, and the devil blinds the mind of those who do not believe that. Because if you believe it, then the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, which is the image of God, should shine unto your mind. It would do that. And you would put off this stuff. You would put it away immediately if you saw that, if you understood that. Now, listen, to set you up, we're talking about what we got to deal with today, talking about the devil, and who is the devil, what is the devil, and how does the devil work. We're gonna, I might as well just tell y'all in the beginning, put your seatbelts on. Don't even take them off. Just put them on the default. I want to give you something to help you sustain yourself so you won't jump out of your seatbelt when you hear what I have to say, to set you up. Because this devil, this idea of the devil, again, is designed to take you away. But the devil is not who you think and what you think. What you've been taught the devil is. Oh, brothers and sisters, we've been bamboozled. We've been took. We've been had. We've been lied to. We've been made to think something that simply isn't true. And if you did just a cursory examination, just scratch the surface just a little bit, you would know that it's not true. What we've been taught. And that the truth is the glorious good news of Christ. The glorious good news of yourself is the truth. And it is the gospel. Now, to set you up for what we got to deal with today, I'm going to read a little bit out of chapter 29 of A Course in Miracles to kind of help you hold on to this ride you're about to take. In verse 1 of section 7, it's entitled, Seek Not Outside Yourself. And the Course in Miracles give you the same thing that Jesus gave you, because it is the same thing. Seek not outside yourself, or it will fail, and you will weep each time an idol falls. Just say something about that. It's giving you a statement of fact and telling you what would happen if you go outside of this fact. Seek not outside yourself. Do not look for heaven outside yourself, or it will fail, and you will weep each time an idol falls. All idols are perceived to be outside yourself. Heaven cannot be found where it is not. So if you're looking for heaven and haven't found it, it's because it's not where you're looking. Very simple. To the point. Heaven cannot be found where it is not, and there can be no peace excepting there. Peace won't be there that makes an exception. That heaven can be found where you're looking. Each idol that you worship, when God calls, will never answer in his place. There is no other answer you can substitute and find the happiness his answer brings. Seek not outside yourself, for all your pain. Listen, all your pain comes simply from a futile search for what you want, insisting where it must be found. What if it is not there? Do you prefer that you be right or happy? Be you glad that you are told where happiness abides and seek no longer elsewhere. You will fail if you do. But it is given to you to know the truth and not to seek for it outside yourself. So this is setting us up for the big payback, if you will, in order to get an idea of what is this Satan? What is this devil? Who is this? Is it real? And the course says, set you up, seek not outside yourself. Now, to help you who need to thump on the Bible, the preachers came to Jesus one time and said, where is this heaven that you keep talking about? Maybe they didn't talk about that, but they were very cynical because he was not going into the churches doing it. He was in the streets talking to them. They said, where is heaven you talking about? And he said, a lot of people going to come and tell you it's over here, it's over there, it's in the hidden place, it's in the secret place. He said, for lo, he said, don't go look for heaven there. He said, for the kingdom of heaven is within you. He tells you not to look any place else for it. You're not going to find it in your church. It's just not there, except that you brought it. That's what makes it there. You brought it. But if you bring in heaven, but still seeking for it in that church building or in that assembly, you will not find it. And it just takes a little bit of cursory examination to see the truth of that. Have we found it? Look at our communities. They are packed, they are filled, they are overflowing with churches. We should be the most prosperous people on planet Earth if that was the case. Because we got more of them than anybody. So let's go on to Satan and look at this and the use of Satan and how that word Satan is used and where it comes from. Satan, or the devil, or the tempter, or the ego, or Lucifer. These are all names that religion gives to this entity they call Satan. And as we read in the Bible, he draws you away from yourself, this entity. He draws you away from yourself. He's the counterfeit of God. In other words, Satan is the opposite of God. He's the anti-God. And he's the one that opposes all that God created. Now, it obviously draws out a lot of problems. In the book of called The Origins of Satan, and it says that the real definition of Satan is crazy thinking. Crazy thinking, that it contends that Satan or the devil is not an actual entity that exists, but it is crazy thinking. Now, they have a way to keep you from understanding that because they give you these platitudes that says the biggest trick that Satan taught you is to believe that he is not real. And that is to keep that Satan in place so you won't look at God. I have heard ministers when I was going to church often, they'd be up there saying the church prayer before the service starts, and they're praying to God, and they're saying, oh God, Father, thank you for this, that, and the other. And then they start praying to Satan in the same voice, in the same prayer. Satan, the Lord rebuke you. Satan this, Satan that. They're praying to God and Satan, which tells you they see a space. a separation, an existence of God, an existence of Satan. But then they tell you that God is omnipresent. But God can't be everywhere at the same time, and there be room for a Satan to exist. So you see the problem there. But the book talks about Satan is literally crazy thinking. And we're going to follow that logic to see if that is the case, or is there an actual Satan that exists. In the book of Job, in the Bible, you see the sons of God coming to present themselves before the Lord. And the book says that Satan also came. And Satan came, and you didn't hear any conversation. Read the book of Job. You heard no conversation between the sons of God and the Lord. The only conversation you hear is between the Lord and Satan. And the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And so you've been taught that this present means that they came to show and give homage to him. Well, I pointed out that there's about 4 ways that the word present can be used. It can be used as present. It can be used as I'm here. It can be used in terms of time, talking about the present time. It can be used as a gift, or it can be used as an indictment. And I'm suggesting to you that the sons of God was not coming to pay homage. They was coming to indict the Lord. And you don't see this conversation between them, but you do see a conversation between the Lord and Satan. And he says, have you considered my servant Job, that he is an upright man, one that eschews evil and does good? Well, why would God just out of nowhere say that? It is because the sons of God was challenging him regarding those who follow him. And so he was saying to Satan, because Satan was believing this, and he said, well, look, have you looked at my son Job? Because Satan was the one going about to confuse and deceive. And the sons of God saying, everybody that follows you, they're like this. So Satan is believing it. And so you hear the Lord God say, well, have you considered my servant Job? He's an upright man. He does good. He follows me and he does good. And that's when you see this temptation going on. You know the story. Satan challenges him. He gives him permission to go whip Satan's ass, whip Job, give him HIV, kill his kids, kill off his servants, do everything that he could do. God is giving Satan permission to destroy this man. Again, the sons of God in the same book comes back and do the same thing. This time it says Satan also came to present himself. This is the second time. Read it. The book of Job. The second time the sons of God came, Satan also came, but he came this time to present himself. The first time he came to see what was going to go down. And then an interesting statement is made by this Lord. Oh, I know what you've been taught. I know what you've been taught. I got to tell you, we're going to higher heights. I know what you've been taught. I've been taught the same thing. It's rattling around in my mind like it has yours. So he comes back the second time and he says, well, look at my servant Job. Now, check this out. This is Lord talking. No conversation going on with the Son of God. He says, he holds fast to his integrity, though you have moved me against him to destroy him without a cause. Satan moves God to destroy an innocent man. Satan moves God to destroy Job without cause. So you notice here that there's problems occurring when we start talking about this characteristic of God and what they tell us to worship. But if you notice here in that story, Satan has access to God, and Satan is able to negotiate with God as an equal. And Satan in this story of Job is able to move God and move God to destroy somebody without a cause. Satan's able to move God to do that. Not Dr. Clement saying that. That's in your Bible. It's got to be straightened out because this is making God a schizophrenic. Continue. Jesus in the book of Matthew, chapter 16, write it down, go read it for yourself. He calls his disciple Peter Satan. He said, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for thou savorest not the things of God, but the things of man." What was he rebuking? Was he rebuking an entity that was talking to him through Peter? Or was he rebuking thinking that was insane, crazy thinking? So what had happened in this case was that Peter, Jesus had began to tell his disciples, I got to go do this, that, the other. I got to go kill. They after me. They're going to bust a cap in me. I got to go through this. Now, Peter, as his friend, and I would do the same thing. And probably you would too. Your friend tells you that somebody about to kill him. You're going to say, "No, baby, that's not going to happen. You my dog. Ain't nobody killing you." That's what Peter said. He thought, "Oh, you understand? I'm speaking in today's language." Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan," to Peter, for telling him, "Oh, no, you don't have to go get killed. You don't have to do all of this." Now, this was right after Peter said to Jesus, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." This was sometime after that. But now another voice is speaking through Peter. And you have to really think about it, whether or not Peter was the one who understood the reality, and Jesus being the one who did not get it yet. Just put that in your mind. Because when we start talking about sacrificing, then you might think a little different. I'm stimulating your thoughts. I know I'm violating every thought you've been taught, but you can pick them back up. You don't have to take what I'm saying. So anyway, he says that in Matthew 16, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for you say there's not the things of God, but of men." And then in Luke 10, Jesus said, "I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning." So we see here that Jesus actually acknowledges the existence of some type of entity called Satan. Now, Satan, there was a situation going on. I'll give you some historical fact. In the book of Jeremiah, God gets mad at the people because outside the city, they were setting up big fires and throwing their firstborn sons, sacrificing their firstborn son to the devil or to Satan. This is in the book of Jeremiah. They were thinking that because they had done something, their crops were not growing, their rain wouldn't come, and certain things was happening because they felt that they had done something wrong and they needed a sacrifice. And so they would sacrifice their firstborn sons to the devil to get him off of from doing, withholding the rain and this, that, and the other. Now, first of all, I can't understand nor can I see with any reasonableness, and nor can you, except you abandon reality, anybody sacrificing the lives of their child to a god. But yet the people of Israel were sacrificing their firstborn sons, throwing them in the fire in this valley called Hinnom. And this valley of Hinnom, they would build these fires and throw their children in as a sacrifice. And this Hinnom translates from Hebrew to the word, guess what? Hell. So here's where you got this idea of Satan being coupled with the word hell, and Satan is in hell and is leading you to hell, this literal fire that God has set up to put those who follow Satan in. Now remember, God is not the author of fear or confusion. And if God uses fear to motivate you to good, and Satan uses fear to motivate you to evil, then how can you know the difference between God and Satan? Because they're both using fear to get you to do something opposite. Put that in your mind. So many times Satan, ladies and gentlemen, is confused with God. And there's no better place than to see this than in the 2nd and 3rd chapter of Genesis, when you think you are looking at God, but you're really looking at Satan. Because God tells you not to curse. He tells you not to curse. Your nature tells you that. Your nature tells you that. You know by nature that there's something about giving what you don't want to someone else because you're giving it to yourself. You know this by nature. You don't need anybody to tell you that. That is because of the quality of yourself. It is not because you are a sinner. If you were a sinner, doing good would be a temptation. You see that? You would naturally do evil, but doing good, I'm tempted to do good. You're not tempted to do good. You're tempted to do evil. And I will show you this, how that works. But Satan is many times confused with God. In the book of James, I'm going to show you as we move on to this. Buckle up. James chapter 1. And I want to tie this into Job, when this temptation came to get Job to curse God. And I want to show you in another story to show you some things about how we can unravel this confusion about the nature of God. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempts he any man. See that? God can't be tempted. You cannot move God to do evil, nor does God use evil to move you. He can't be tempted, nor does he tempt anybody. Listen, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away from his own, when he's drawn away of his own lust, and he is enticed. This is when every man is tempted. He's tempted when he is drawn away from himself. And when he bites into that drawing away, then the idea of sin and death enters into the mind. And he feels a separation from God, though he can't be separated. But the point I want you to catch here is let no man I don't care if he's bishop, pope, district elder, imam. Let no man say when he is tempted. And I'm going to say, let no man tell you this. I'm tempted of God. God tempted me. God put me to the fire. God did this. He took my child from me. God did this, that, and the other to see what I would do, to give me something better. He killed my baby. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempts he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticement. And then he says, do not err, or don't make this error. He said, don't make the error that I just said. Don't make this error. Every good, and I spell God instead of good, every good and perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variableness nor shadow of turning. Every good and perfect gift, ladies and gentlemen, not evil, but every good, every perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. Ye are the light of the world. Be ye perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. Your Father, the Father of lights. Every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights, in whom is no variableness. There's no X factor in it that you got to guess. There's no variable in it. In the equation, you know all the terms of the equation. There is no variableness, nor is there a shadow of turning, which simply means, brothers and sisters, that when you, because it is, imagine a ball of perfectly a smooth sphere, a ball, perfectly smooth, and you shine a light on it and you turn it. It will not be a shadow that shows you that it's turning. So there's no shadow of turning from the Father of light. It's right there. Every good and perfect gift comes down from above. So when they start telling you that God tempts you, when God did this to you and God did that to you, you are error. You are listening to an error. Jesus prayed, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So God doesn't tempt you with evil, nor can he be tempted with evil. And therefore, God does not lead you into temptation, but he does deliver you from evil. So you got to think about it in terms of what the Course in Miracles pointed out in the beginning. Seek not outside yourself. And what James said, every man is tempted when he is drawn away from himself. That is when the temptation occurs, when you are drawn away from the reality of yourself. You are real. And when you're drawn away, you're being drawn into thinking that you are not real. I know. All right. I know. You don't believe it. Even though I'm reading it to you, saying it straight, is I know when I started pondering it, the difficulty I had in accepting this, even though it was reading, and I'm calling the Bible the Word of God, and I'm having a problem. But let me continue to help you to understand this. Take notes. So Satan is many times confused with God. He does not tempt you, nor does he get tempted. He does not lead you into temptation, but he does deliver you from evil. Now, let's turn to the book of Matthew, chapter 4. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, was Jesus' prayer. God cannot be tempted, but every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust. Then was Jesus led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Do you see the obvious problem with that? What spirit was Jesus following into the wilderness for the purpose of being tempted by the devil? This was the purpose. So therefore, the process had to be in line with the purpose. Now, Jesus said that God don't use tools of Satan. If Satan casts out Satan, his kingdom will come to naught. So the question I want to put before you is, what spirit was that leading Jesus into the wilderness for the purpose of being tempted by the devil? Was that God's spirit? Every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Drawn away from what? Drawn away from himself, from the reality of himself. So this spirit that was leading Jesus into the wilderness was showing you Jesus being led and enticed away from the reality of himself. And this enticement is going to be brought out in this story. He was not being led by a Holy Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Said Jesus wasn't led by the Spirit. Let's keep reading. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterwards hungry. Now, I'm going to put this in here so that you can see what's really going on. He got into the wilderness, ladies and gentlemen. And when he got into the wilderness, he then realized, oh my God, that was not, I've been tricked. I've been bamboozled. I've been tricked into the wilderness. It was the devil leading me into this wilderness. This crazy thinking leading me into this wilderness. He learned obedience by the things that he suffered. He had to practice just like you got to practice. So when he got into the wilderness, ladies and gentlemen, he was hungry. He found himself in the wilderness, and then he started to fast because he wanted deliverance from the situation he was in. That's the reason he wasn't led into the wilderness to fast and pray. He was led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. But when he got into the wilderness, he realized how he was being led there, and he started fasting in order to seek God, seek the thinking of God in himself, come back to himself for deliverance from the devil, or deliverance from evil. But he's in there, he's fasting and he's praying, and the tempter came at that time, and this is the purpose for him being led there to be tempted. If thou be the Son of God. So notice what the temptation is. It's first stating his reality of who he is, but challenging it, making him challenge the reality of himself. If thou be the Son of God, and the first thing it tells him to do is to turn bread or stones into bread. What is that saying? It's saying that if you be the Son of God, your life is in what you eat. So you have the power to manipulate the material world and turn this stone into bread, which you do. And that's when he said, it's written, thou shalt not live by bread alone, but by every word that cometh out of the mouth of God. And then he took him up to the temple. See, so your life is not in what you eat or drink. You can turn the bread into stone, but in this particular situation, this would be substantiating the reality that his life is in the rock and not in himself. So the second temptation, he took him to the temple. And notice, ladies and gentlemen, he took him to the pinnacle of the temple. That tells you who's over the temple. Satan, or the tempter, took Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple. And he said, if you be the Son of God, again, challenging his reality. I want you to make sure you understand this point about challenging the reality of your identity, because this is what this is all about. It's about drawing you away from yourself and making you believe you are something other than what God created. So the second one, he took him to the pinnacle of the temple, and he said, you know what? You already know you got life in yourself. Cast yourself down, because you got the angels. They're going to help you and bring you back up and all this kind of stuff. He said, it is written, thou shalt not, notice, tempt the Lord thy God. Now remember, God can't be tempted. So who is Jesus talking about when he said, it is written, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God? Because the Lord thy God can be tempted. And that's what he would have been doing. The author, he would be putting himself under, these are the mysteries. These are the mysteries. But a miracle is nothing, baby, but a law that you are unaware of. When you become aware of it, it's no longer a mystery. It's no longer a miracle. But if he had went with that thinking, he would have been putting his mind under the power of the Lord thy God, who can be tempted. And taking himself, now remember, this is the temptation. Taking his reality away from himself as he was created, and putting himself under the power of the impossible. And then the third temptation, you will notice that all of them have to do with his identity, as are all of your temptations. They have nothing to do with the person that's in front of you. Nothing to do with that person. It's only going on in your mind to bring you out of the knowledge of yourself. And so the third one, worship me in exchange for this world. Now, I didn't read that way, but that's what it's about. The third temptation is for Jesus to worship. Now, notice the worship is the thing that puts you under the power of this world. It is the worship that does it. Worship me, and I will give you all this, because I own this world. But you got to worship me. Some of y'all. It is the worshiping that is the thing that puts you under the power, because God does not demand, command, or even warn it. What can you render to the Lord? What do you have that God doesn't have? You got to stand up and tell him how great and beautiful he is. You got to tell God how great and beautiful, he is. This is the worship. Worship me and I will give you all this, because I own this world and I demand worship. And Satan, again, is the God of this world, who blinds the mind of them who believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who was the image of God, should shine unto them. All three of these temptations had to do with you being drawn out of yourself, drawn away from yourself, as the book of James said, and enticed by something. If you worship me, I'll give it all to you. And so now, parlaying that, and I'm about to wrap it up. I'll stay within that hour. Parlaying that with this whole idea of the Lord, this whole idea of the Lord, let me see. Okay. This whole idea of the Lord, this entity is not a real entity separate from God. It is the Son of God taking on or considering a crazy thought. Because it's obviously crazy thinking to suggest that God is omnipresent or everywhere at the same time, and yet cannot, and there's a space for Satan. It's obviously crazy thinking. The Course in Miracles approaches this a little bit. It talks about the two worlds. And in this two worlds, it talks about this little thought. You have been told to bring darkness to the light, and guilt, listen, to holiness. You've been told to bring darkness to the light and guilt to holiness. And you have also been told that error must be corrected at its source. Therefore, it is the tiny part of yourself, the little thought that seems split off and separate, that the Holy Spirit needs. You've been taught, we've been taught, ladies and gentlemen, to bring darkness to the light. But we think that we are dark, when in reality we are the light. You are the light of the world. I'm sorry if you don't like it, but you are the light of the world. And this city that you are, that's set on a hill, cannot be hid. It means everybody sees it. You can't hide it. You try to put it under a bushel, it can't be put out. It can be covered up and almost brought to extinction, but you can't put it out. That light is still there. It doesn't matter what you think of yourself, because since you didn't create yourself, you cannot tell what you are except through consulting with the one who created you. And if the one who created you, or who you think created you, tells you you are a sinner, you know you're listening to the Father of heaven. The God is going to validate, and always does validate, the reality, no matter the circumstance that you find yourself in. It doesn't matter. The avenue, the way of escape is always made through the validation of your reality, of who you really are. And once you come in contact with that, you discover the way of escape. It appears out of nowhere. The way of escape just comes. I ain't talking religion, I'm talking science. See, if I was talking religion, then I would be trying to get you to join my church or my organization. But when the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. You are not obligated to some organization or some doctrine. You are obligated only to listen to the Spirit that raised, listen, Christ from the dead. Dead people. We are dead people. I don't have to go through all the stuff to tell you what that is. You know it. But the raising of Christ, who is the image of God, is raised by the light that comes into the mind. It has nothing to do with religion and superstition. Next week, I'm going to be dropping everything. You think you heard something about Jesus today? You think you heard something about Jesus today? Wait till next week. Join me at 9:45 a.m. for Sunday school next week. We are going to talk about the Son of God, and it's probably going to take a couple of lessons because there's just so much information here. Enjoy your Sunday. Enjoy the football games. I'm Dr. Fleming, and I'm signing.
Give me more darkness, said the blind man. Give me more folly, said the fool. Give me stone silence, said the deaf man. I didn't believe Sunday school.